170 AD, Germania beyond the Danube River. On a night when freezing winds shook the Roman legion's tents, a man sits alone under a lamp, writing. Outside, the groans of the wounded and the crackling of watchfires intermingle. He was the emperor of the most powerful empire, yet at the same time, the loneliest of men. Imagine for a moment, hundreds of thousands of lives are in your hands. Parthia to the east, Marcomanni tribes to the north, and a plague rampant within the empire. And yet, here you are writing a diary. Crazy? No. This was exactly how Marcus Aurelius protected Rome without ever leaving the front lines during his 19-year reign. The Meditations he wrote inside that tent became the most famous memoir of an emperor in the world. It wasn't written for publication. It wasn't a record intended for anyone else to see. It was an internal battlefield solely meant to persuade, train, and break down his own self. Today, we enter that battlefield. The story of a man who sustained an empire not with swords, but with words, not with legions, but with thought. We begin now. What is war? It is a sequence of variables. No matter how meticulously you strategize, a single downpour can shatter a formation. Supply lines are cut, allies betray you, and plague spreads among the soldiers. Aurelius's era was particularly harsh. Historians record that 1/10 of the empire's population perished. Faced with this chaos, Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Some things are up to us, and some things are not. Even an emperor cannot change the weather, reduce the enemy's numbers, or stop a soldier's death. What, then, can he control? Only two things: the discipline of the legions and his own equanimity." Instead of obsessing over the outcome of victory or defeat, he commanded himself to focus solely on the best action possible in this very moment. This was the invisible force that kept the Roman legions as the most disciplined army. The more you try to grasp the result, the more it slips through your fingers. Only when you exist fully in the process does victory follow naturally. Philosopher Pierre Hadot compressed the core of Aurelius's thought into one phrase: the inner citadel. No matter how much the outside world burns or collapses, there is one fortress no one can take: your own mind. But this wasn't just a story of personal discipline. The emperor's state of mind was the empire's state of mind. Rome was a front line on all sides back then. The Marcomannic Wars dragged on for 16 years. Conspiracies crawled within the Senate, and Lucius Verus, the emperor's co-ruler, chose pleasure over the battlefield. In the midst of all this turbulence, Aurelius knew that the most fearsome enemy was not the opposing army. The most dangerous enemies were anger, despair, and self-pity. So every morning, he asked himself, what almost made me lose my composure today? And did I overcome it? This question is the true structure of the Meditations, an endless cycle of self-accusation, self-correction, and self-reconstruction. He proved through his own life that the most powerful tactic is not the skill to defeat an enemy, but the attitude of not losing oneself. Many empires in history were destroyed even after winning wars. The reason is simple: victory bred arrogance, and arrogance became the seed for the next war. But Aurelius was different. Even after crushing the Marcomanni tribes, he prioritized administrative reform over a victory parade. There is a line in Meditations: "Be most careful when you have achieved victory." He knew that victory is a moment of excitement, and excitement clouds judgment. He examined himself even more humbly after a win. Instead of enslaving the conquered Germanic tribes, he settled them in border regions to absorb them as Rome's defensive assets. He understood that a true strategist's choice is not crushing the enemy, but converting that energy into the internal substance of the empire. This is where Aurelius's philosophy differs from simple endurance or resignation. He was by no means passive, he was the most active of emperors. However, his energy was directed toward internal strengthening, not external display. A true winner is not intoxicated by victory but is already preparing for the next battle. Aurelius wrote in that tent even on the night the war ended. Many people think of philosophy as a hobby for those with idle time. They ask, who has time for meditation when life is so busy? But Aurelius's life is the most powerful rebuttal to that claim. He was one of the busiest people in human history. He had to handle war, administration, plague, and rebellion all at once. Why did he bother to make time for philosophical self-reflection? The answer is clear. For him, philosophy was the training required to not collapse in the face of crisis. Just as an athlete doesn't stop training the day before a game, he never stopped training his inner muscles even on the harshest days. Look at the tone of Meditations. It isn't grand or moralizing. Instead, it contains the raw voice of a human being getting angry at himself, complaining about being tired, yet standing up again. That honesty is why it reaches our hearts today, even after 2,000 years. What he left behind was not a victory report. What he truly left behind was the most honest answer to how a human can avoid losing themselves in an uncertain world. And that answer is still valid today. In fact, it is even more valid in this current age. In 180 AD, Aurelius passes away in Vindobona, present-day Vienna, during yet another campaign. A servant who witnessed the emperor's death recorded it. His last words were supposedly, "Why do you weep for me? Weep for your own weakness." His equestrian statue still stands in the Piazza del Campidoglio in Rome. But the true monument is not made of stone. 2,000 years later, people all over the world open meditations in their most extreme moments. Amidst bombings, in operating rooms, in offices on the brink of bankruptcy. Bill Clinton said he reads it regularly, and Nelson Mandela kept this book with him in his cell on Robben Island. What made this book immortal? It's simple. Aurelius didn't write the story of a perfect saint. He wrote the story of a human being who falls every day and rebuilds every day. In it, we see ourselves. Today, we also stand on the battlefield called life. Unpredictable events pour in, and uncontrollable fears surge. In those moments, listen to the whisper of the emperor from that dark tent in Germania. Do not try to conquer the world. First, conquer yourself. That is the real reason Rome never collapsed even in crisis, and it is the only way you can endure today. If today's video was helpful, try letting go of one thing in your life right now that you cannot control. And focus on one thing you can control. That is the only advice the emperor from 2,000 years ago offers you today.